All right. Good morning and welcome. My name is Lorena Gonzalez, and I'm very proud to serve as the head of the San Diego Labor Council as well as one of the co-chairs of A Better San Diego. So thank you for coming out this morning, and happy Pride Weekend to everybody. For those who haven't, I just want to explain a little bit about what A Better San Diego is. It's a coalition of community groups, religious groups, faith-based groups, as well as labor, who've come together to create a coalition and talk about issues that affect the economy of San Diego and the true issues that affect San Diegans. We felt like in the media, especially the mainstream media, as well as so much of what happens in San Diego, we're told how we should feel about our neighborhoods. We're told what we should be focusing on. We're told what's important, and yet we know from being members of San Diego, or of our neighborhoods, what really matters to us. So the main focus is economic issues, although we've also reached out, of course, to our brothers and sisters in the LGBT community and some other communities that the issues are tangential to the economy of San Diego, but important nonetheless. We have some basic principles that we agree with, including equality, and that's why today, for a celebration of Pride Weekend, we wanted to really recognize what we see as an amazing success in the LGBT community, and how far one community that, in all honesty, was once probably marginalized, and probably some people still think marginalized, but San Diego has grown immensely and has done an incredible job through a variety of mechanisms, both grassroots and grass tops, to achieve tremendous success in how we, as members of other communities, and trying to organize our communities, can learn from those successes. So that's what we had hoped for today, and I'm sure we will get it. Before we start, I want to thank the elected officials who came out today to hear this panel, including, of course, our San Diego City Council member, Todd Gloria. We will get to her, but our State Senator, Chris Kehoe. Our Airport Authority Chairman, Robert Gleason. Lemon Grove City Councilman George Gastel, Southwestern College Trustee Humberto Peraza, Sweetwater School Trustee Bertha Lopez, and then also we're going to do the one clap for the folks who came to represent their elected officials. From Senator Juan Vargas's office, Scott Hinkle. From Assemblymember Marty Block's office, Chris Ward. From Councilman David Alvarez's office, Travis Knowles. From Senator Barbara Boxer's office, Caridad Sanchez. And from Congressman Bob Filner's office, of course, our next mayor. I didn't really say that here because this is a 501c3. Lene Lewis. Erase that from the tape. I want to remind everybody that the groups that do form A Better San Diego are 501c3s, and although we do announcements at the end, we don't talk about candidates, only issues. Totally. Do not do as I do. So I'm speaking as the head of the Labor Council right there. So I'm so excited to have a really diverse panel to talk about the gains that have been made and what's next for the LGBT community, and how they've been able to organize both themselves and the broader community to achieve some amazing things in San Diego. And I think really San Diego has been at the forefront of what's happened in the United States, and as we see change happens, we saw so much of it start in San Diego. The hearts and minds of people change in San Diego, where you have a number of even Republican officials. Most Republican officials, I think, now are proclaimed to be pro-equality, which is not like the rest of the country for sure. That's as a result of hard work of a lot of people in this room and on this panel, and in particular, somebody who can give us kind of, I think, the full background, because she became the first member of the community to get elected to office, correct? I want to make sure that I got that right. And of course, she got elected to City Council quite a few years ago. I'm not going to say how many. 93. Was it only 93? That's old. I'm getting old, that means. And unfortunately, she's about to retire from her position in the State Senate. She has been not only, obviously, a leader in the LGBT community, she's been a leader for us in labor. She's been a leader for so many communities in San Diego, and really has pulled it all together. So to give us the background, and really from where things were to where things are now is our state senator, Chris Kehoe.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Pride Weekend. Thank you for turning out. There are a million things to do all day today and tomorrow, and I appreciate you being here, but I really appreciate Labor hosting a Pride discussion at the start, at the very top of Pride Weekend. And I think it's a great kickoff, and it's a great example of what this morning's theme is. Working together, building alliances. And if you look at the last 20 years in San Diego, you get a textbook example of how, in the case of the labor community and the LGBT community, how that alliance has grown and strengthened over the years and continues to evolve. And programs like Pride at Work and others, Progressive Agenda all together, bringing civil rights activists, environmental activists, labor activists, LGBT activists together. That's why we've been productive. That's why we continue to advance a progressive agenda successfully, because there's strength in numbers, and you're part of those numbers. So I want to thank Labor for organizing this morning and pointing the way in a lot of different areas. And I want to also thank Robert and Jersey for being here on the panel with me. I think it's a wonderful panel, and again, I'm proud to serve with them. And as Loretta mentioned, I'm in my last few months in office. I'll be leaving the legislature at the end of November. But I know I've become a part of history because I was in the City Beat word game this week. Right. You know you've arrived. Kehoe's down at the bottom, and it was in, what is it? Left to right, not backwards the way some of the names were, it was pointed out to me. So, along with Robert, was on the same line. In fact, Robert was first. Todd Gloria was there, another piece of history, Todd, for you. Congratulations, along with Tony Ekins and a lot of others. I've been asked to talk briefly about the electoral and legislative victories, and I'll just focus on the last 20 years because that's when I have been most active and when things are freshest in my mind. And whenever you give these talks, it's all very linear, it's all very neat, everything moves along. What happened this year, and then the next year this happened and this happened. In real life, it's not like that. In real life, there are big gains, we make a lot of progress, and then there are setbacks and there are losses. There are times when things come together more easily than others. But I want to just give you an overview and let you know what, at least in hindsight, what my views are on some of these things. And I'm speaking of political action. Electoral politics, legislative politics, by definition, are political action. And we have to remember all these things happen in context of our daily lives and what's going on culturally and socially. So we all know that things are happening in the real world, that don't necessarily affect what we're doing directly, but it's part of the context. So I don't know how to judge what Ellen DeGeneres is coming out meant to all of us, or what Will and Grace meant, and lots of other things. But we know that it helps move people. Just as the president's stands on Don't Ask, Don't Tell and marriage equality recently moved so many people. I mean, the numbers actually shifted in a matter of a day or two. So these are things that we can prepare for, build the groundwork for, and then we get these sudden bursts of recognition and advancement that are inspiring for us, and I think help educate people who aren't giving our issues so much thought. But in Sacramento and in San Diego over the last 20 years, there has been tremendous progress. I mean, I'm terrifically proud of being the first member of the gay community to be elected to public office, but I'm even prouder that so many other openly gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people are serving in public office, in appointed positions, and in the private sector. judges, attorneys, doctors, council members, state legislators. That is real advancement. We need our own people at the table, always. That is part of the conversation. It's not all of the conversation. I asked my staff to put together some of the bills that have been passed since 2000, 12 years. The California legislature has been a national leader. There are literally dozens and dozens of bills, approaching 100 bills that deal with every possible issue. From the establishment of the Domestic Partners Registry back in 2000, a bill by Carol Migden. Jackie Goldberg went through the entire state code and wherever possible substituted registered domestic partner for spouse or husband or wife. Custody issues, property rights issues, employment discrimination, health coverage, insurance coverage, adoption, employment and housing discrimination, hate crimes, prosecution, and prevention. All of that has been addressed by the California legislature and signed into various laws over the last 12 years. And I also like to point out the California legislature 3 times passed a marriage equality bill by Mark Leno. Only to have it vetoed by then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. So we know that we've made a lot of progress. We know we have a long way to go. I want to hear from the other panel members and from you. We still have important civil rights issues to work on. When the Boy Scouts can, with impunity, just say we're not going to deal with our own gay children in the Scouts. We're going to ban them and their gay parents. We know we still have a long fight ahead of us, but we can also look at the strength and the alliances and the progress we've made over the last 10 years. And we've got to shift our focus and make sure that we are continuing to build alliances with progressive Americans and progressive San Diegans and Californians every day, because we need to make sure as we look at our political future that those of us who are working together for full equality, economic justice, are being as strongly united as possible. So I want to thank you again for being here for Pride Weekend, and I see my time is quickly approaching my end, so I'll turn it over, and thank you all again.
Has been here before, so we try to give you a little bit of speaking and a lot of time for questions. So we want to make sure people come for different reasons, have different things that they want to ask about, and we want to make sure we leave time for that. So it's with great pride. I wanted to say really quickly, I left out an elected official. I'm really sorry. A member of the Chula Vista Elementary School Board, Glendora Tremper, is also here. So thank you. And then, so we're going to bring up now a good friend of mine, but somebody who is well known not only locally but on the national level with his work with the Victory Fund and really just doing amazing things to get not only LGBT folks elected nationwide, but here in San Diego as well. He also serves as the chair of the Airport Authority and helps chair the Harvey Milk Breakfast, which was started a few years ago. And there probably isn't, I think, a big effort done in the LGBT community that's not done with the help of Robert Gleason.
Thank you. Yeah, sometimes it feels like that. I am thrilled to be here with so many folks that I have worked on so many of these efforts with over the years. This is a great coalition, and I think what is great about San Diego and what moves San Diego forward and forward better and faster than some other folks is all of this work in coalition. And I say that having spent a long time on the board of our local LGBT center, as one of the folks who came together, I guess almost 10 years ago now, to build the Community Leadership Council there at the center, which is very much like this, a coalition of groups coming together to do what is hard in coalition, which is to focus on those things that we have in common and to agree to disagree or to leave at the door those things where we might not necessarily agree. And working like that moves us all forward because we share a lot of common values, and I think that's really important. I think the biggest lesson for moving forward is what has been the motto or the tagline at the center for years, which is pride, power, progress. And so much of the efforts to move the community forward in this movement over the last 20, 30 years start with pride, start with visibility, and I think that's the lesson for all of us in all of our communities. Coming out as yourself in whatever that means, whether it's your orientation or your gender identity or your support for various causes. And people take a lot of things for granted sometimes about who you are, where you are, based on your position or your profession or something. And it's important for all of us to come out as supporters and come out as allies and come out and do that. And that's always been the first step in building these coalitions. And I think that the next lesson is the power question. Starting particularly with the LGBT community, there was a belief and a recognition that equality and progress weren't just going to be given to the community. It was something that people needed to take an active role in and take. And that started principally, I think, with economic power. Recognizing that coming together and supporting our own running for office could make an important contribution. So, Senator Kehoe in that race in 1993 as the first openly LGBT elected official in San Diego opened the door for many more to follow. The Gay and Lesbian Victory Fund, which is a national political action committee, it's the only national PAC dedicated solely to electing openly LGBT people to office. It's just a little over 20 years old. There were about 50 openly LGBT elected officials across the country. That's out of 500,000 elected positions in 1991. That number's grown tenfold and then some. But the amazing thing is the trajectory of that. In this election cycle alone, we will endorse about 200 candidates for office. And with a 70% win rate, that will provide significant progress in that regard. So the goal was, show some economic power, come together, elect our own to office, and that will lead to progress. So today in San Diego, we have, there have been currently in office and out of office 9 elected office holders throughout the county, which includes 4 judges. Or no, that does not include the judges, plus 4 judges and some others on the way through a combination of election and appointment. And a couple of dozen appointed officials in the city of San Diego and now some county appointees who are in positions where we can affect change. So not only the importance of elected positions, but the importance of those appointed positions, whether it's at the airport or the port or the city audit committee or what used to be CCDC or any of those organizations. And what I guess the lesson in that regard is, for us as a community, for the LGBT community, progress has come from having a seat at the table. Our friends are incredible, and we couldn't possibly get elected or receive equality without them. But sometimes being at the table really makes a difference. So no piece of statewide relationship or equality legislation has passed any state legislature without at least one openly LGBT member. And no relationship equality measure has ever passed in a state legislature without there being a caucus of LGBT elected. So being there, as the old political adage is, right, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And it's sometimes unfortunately true. So having the visibility, having the pride that comes from that, and in the end having the progress to go with it is something that's gratifying for all of us. A lot of room to go, and I'd like to just again thank particularly the elected and appointed folks who are serving and representing the community so well, and to all the coalition members for helping support moving equality forward. Thanks.
And as I was actually talking to the panelists and some other folks about this, I think we have to recognize, obviously, not being a member of the community, but being a strong ally, there are times when I look at the community and think, well, you've achieved so much. I mean, you guys have like done everything in a very short amount of time, right? Because it always from the outside it looks probably better. But I also know in our work with so many grassroots organizations, in particular Canvas for a Cause, that there's a long way to go for a lot of members of the community, and that can't be forgotten as well. And so we wanted to kind of transition to what else is going out there, what are some of the gains that still are yet to be made, and what are some of the ways that people are working from the grassroots on making those changes. So it's with an honor that I bring up a friend of mine, Deustch, who's the Director of Programs for Canvas for a Cause.
I'm barely taller than this podium. I'm actually on my tippy toes. So I'm Jersey. I am the Director of Programs for Canvas for a Cause, and I am so happy that Canvas for a Cause has a seat at the table and not on the menu today. I went to Humboldt State University and got a degree in journalism, and finished about 4 years ago, and I've been organizing with different groups since starting college. And I'm pretty new to San Diego. I just got here 1.5 years ago after working on some political campaigns in New York and Northern California. So what I prepared is a little different, like 3 very specific ways Canvas for a Cause and the LGBT grassroots movement, what we're using to be really strategic, and some things we've really messed up on and learned from. So hopefully people can learn the history and not make the same mistakes that we have, because we have made a lot. That's very true. So first I wanted to talk about messaging and talking points. It's really important that we create language that everyone understands, that will create a comfortable it will create comfortability for people to actually get involved. So in other words, when you're creating slogans, campaigns, messaging, emails, whatever it is, you're not being over academic. Even language with acronyms confuse people and make people feel like they already should be educated on whatever it is you're talking about. So even something like LGBT, the first time we say it in whether we're doing some kind of education or talking to somebody one-on-one or on the phone, we say lesbian, bisexual, transgender, gay, right? We say I did it all backwards, but that's kind of cool. Lesbian got moved to the front because of the feminist movement. I'm not done, no. Okay. So for example, like UFCW, it kind of means nothing to most people who are not part of, work for, or work with the UFCW. So most people probably wouldn't feel comfortable asking questions if you're talking to them about something they feel like they should already know about, right? So turn confusing public education into accessible education. So for example, it was kind of hard to think of a bad example, but I was thinking about the special exemptions. But something really easy to relate to that everybody can understand and feel like it affects them. And we were having a meeting about this, planning it actually, and I picked up on some language from that guy in the back corner, just when he was talking about special exemptions, and he said, you know, this is about the 8-hour workday. And I was like, so protect the 8-hour workday, vote no on special exemptions, Prop 32. Like going outside of what makes sense to your immediate community, so it actually reaches out and shows people in one sentence how it affects them. The next thing I want to talk about was being on the positive instead of being on the positive, like the offensive side instead of the defensive side. This is something that LGBT community falls into actually the wrong way most of the time. So it's hard to explain without giving examples, but you could turn a statement like anti-gay groups are bashing a bill that decreases gay bullying into LGBT groups are working to protect a bill that protects students from gay bullying. This statement, or you could turn a statement, I'm totally going there, stop SDPD from arresting peaceful protesters into support free speech and demand that SDPD allow peaceful protests. The reason why, and I didn't know this till Ben told me, but it's actually even proven on social media like Twitter that people are more likely to respond and like retweet things when you make a positive message. And it makes people feel like you're winning and they actually want to join. However, when you do have the opportunity to speak, write about, or publicize something more than 1 or 2 lines, it's really strategic to talk about the opposition. So, for example, you could just end with it, right? So, protect medical marijuana patients. Over 60% of HIV/AIDS patients use cannabis to find relief from their pain and harsh side effects of their pharmaceuticals. However, local law enforcement is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to criminalize patients. Because without opposition, we really don't, it doesn't make sense to anybody why we're fighting, right? I know these things sound simple, but I've tried to really break down things simply since I started working at Canvas for a Cause, or maybe a little before. So you want to use messages that work with more people than just your immediate organization. Make inclusive campaigns. Identify unions with how union members and organizers have saved much of the working class, like the 8-hour workday, or how they've been allies to the LGBT politicians, how they've helped pass discrimination laws for the LGBT community, etc., etc. The other thing I wanted to talk about was coming out. It was really cool that Robert also mentioned this. So oftentimes the most oppressed people are the last to come out, right? So my suggestion is to have whatever issue you're working on, have people come out, empower people to identify that with the campaign, with the movement. So this is the case for any movement. You could say, I'm coming out as gay, I'm coming out as transgender, I'm a truck driver, I'm coming out as a union member. I'm part of the working class, I'm a cannabis patient, I'm HIV positive, I'm undocumented and raising a family. So you want to be mindful, obviously, not to out people, because this could be super dangerous, right, depending on like social construction of where they are, and also literally with authorities. So you don't want to out people, but you want to encourage people to out themselves and identify with what you're working on. Why? Because people who don't think they know a gay person are 10% less likely to vote for gay marriage than a person acquainted with a gay person. People who have LGBT friends or family are almost 60% more likely to vote for gay marriage. This came from Harvey Milk's campaign of get out of the closet and into the streets. I also wanted to talk about building your letters, LGBTQIA. That's a coalition in itself, right? And the letters keep growing and growing and growing. This was not always the case. Once upon a time, you know, lesbians and transgender people were pushed out from the white upper class gay movement. And then lesbians were kicked out of the feminist movement, and then transgender people weren't included till about 10 years ago. But it's obvious to me that the people that are being most oppressed and marginalized for the most amount of time would be the most experienced in organizing. Women got themselves the right to vote, so wouldn't that be the first people you turn to try to get LGBT civil rights? Because they were just doing it. And don't be afraid of public opinion by including the people who are most disenfranchised. These are the people who will most of the time fight the hardest and the most effectively. So racism, ageism, transphobia, sexism, xenophobia, ableism, etc. exist within our movements and campaigns until you make a point to actively include people and fight against all forms of oppression. It'll grow your movement, it'll grow your campaign, you'll have this much bigger base of who fights with you. The very last thing I want, and this is actually a lot faster, I swear, is coalitions outside your immediate coalition, so outside of LGBTQIA. Working with groups that make sense. And I wanted to give a shout out to the San Diego Alliance for Marriage Equality, because they're a group. Yeah. It's really important that we get endorsements and support from the LGBT community, but it's also really important you reach out to work with the people who do the same kind of work as you, right? So CFAC isn't really going to reach out to a group to help us go knock on doors that thinks they're above knocking on doors. But we are going to reach out to the Labor Council and the San Diego Alliance for Marriage Equality because they knock on doors, they like knocking on doors, they believe in knocking on doors just like we do. Yeah. And then the last thing is issue versus candidates. The power of endorsing issues over candidates will grow a larger base for involvement. It's hard to find people en masse who do grassroots work that believe in everything one candidate stands for. Focusing on the issue, for example, special exemptions, will get people out to vote, especially if the message hits home. So if they're out to vote, they're probably going to vote for the person who endorsed the issue that they most care about, right? So you're already getting them out to the polls to vote for whoever endorses the issue you're working on, but it hits home more with people if you actually find the issue, reach out to them, they believe in the issue, so they go to the poll, and while they're at the poll, they vote for the candidate who also endorsed the issue. Those are my 3 big suggestions in general, and things the LGBT community are still working on. Thank you so much for having me.
everything except the I.
Oh, intersex.
See? So you violated your own rule. You used it. You had actually also in front of the queen. I was like, A is asexual, right? Okay. All right. Got the rest of them. It is important. I mean, I usually will ask the question. I think that was a great thing, and we always run into that we use acronyms that nobody knows. What we're going to do right now is just to let you guys know what's going on as the questions are being asked. Pretty traditionally, the center had Pride breakfasts on Friday mornings, and this is the first year they didn't have it. They had a champagne toast, a mimosa toast at the end of that, and so and we're going to have a representative of Pride here to do the toast. But as we're asking questions, we're going to be passing out mimosas. If you don't want champagne, that's fine, don't take it. It does have champagne in it. I'm not printing everyone, so if you are under 21 and you take it, it's your own responsibility. I'm not getting arrested for social host ordinance. I will out you. I would say I think everybody's over 21, but I kind of think they're not. Everybody's over 21, so please monitor yourself. So that is going on. Please just hold it because we are going to do a toast, and ignore all the hoopla going on. But in the meantime, we do want to open it up for questions because I know that there are some questions that people want to ask, and we want to make sure that, a very diverse set of panelists who have a very broad-based history in the LGBT community and organizing in that community. So any questions? All right, we're going to, Jacqueline?
I was wondering if you see any correlation between transgender youth in the LGBTQIA community and the undocumented immigrant community workforce.
All right. Jersey, you want to take that?
Yeah, that's funny because that's something I didn't have time to touch on that I really wanted to. Yeah, I think it's really relative because in the LGBT community, the T was left out for a really long time, and it was something that LGBT organizations were afraid to move forward on because the public didn't, the public was against transgender or thought it was silly or it wasn't like the right thing. It's something people are terrified of still. Same thing with undocumented persons. With undocumented people, it's a social issue that the public just doesn't want to talk about, and it's all framed in the media in the most negative possible ways, right? Just like transgender people on comedy or just silly, ridiculous people. But when those are two of the groups, like what I was saying, that would be the most well organized because they are the most disenfranchised. So not only is it not empowering to not include people who are very seriously affected by working rights and equality, but they literally would help your struggle so much more. And the idea is that the campaign or the movement, the group, has to create the language, and then the public will change, because if we don't do it, nobody else will. Does that make sense?
More questions? Angel?
What has the LGBT community done and doing that has successfully mobilized people in a way labor has not?
Chrissy?
Well,
So the question was, just so everybody can hear, is what has the LGBT community done to mobilize people in a way that labor has not?
I'm struggling to put this positively. I don't know if that's the best way to frame the discussion. I think LGBT community action has started years ago. I would say my personal experience in the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s, when the AIDS crisis exploded in the gay community, we moved away from just organizing around gay white men on sort of a social level to real So Labor's taken great strides and has been, a broader organizing tool, a national and international organizing tool. LGBT is still growing into some of that stuff. So it's just a different style for different needs.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
I would add to elaborate on that, I think, to say that there's apathy in all of these movements, and especially if you make some gains and other things happen. Having really bad shit happen to you is a great way to get people engaged. And unfortunately, it's what happened in the AIDS crisis. It's what happened post Prop 8. The community was a lot more engaged after that happened than before it happened. And those things, it's not taking advantage of a bad situation, but it's reminding people that there is real consequence to inaction. And so I would say that. And then I think the second thing is there's been always a lot of focus in terms of trying to get folks elected into offices and appointed into offices and into those positions to be able to have grass tops support when you've got grassroots behind you and supporting it. And you have to have both, and they have to work in concert. Each needs to recognize the value and importance of it.
Ben?
So obviously coalition building is really important. What are some of the most instructive examples of where coalition building has worked well, and where does the panel see places where we still need to do work, or where there's opportunities for more coalition building moving forward?
Well, here we have a perfect example of coalition building that is, coming into its bloom or whatever. Labor and the LGBT community did not have a tight alliance 20 years ago, but we do now. As I said at the beginning, we need to continue to reach out. We need to reach out to people of color. And I think all of us need to start thinking more about economic justice, because the underground economy, low-wage workers, underground workers, and even the middle class are all under huge economic stress right now. And I think that's got to be one of our future endeavors. And I think LGBT organizing with labor, it's a natural fit there to start looking at economic justice on a broader scale. It's touching everybody that isn't in that 1% bracket.
Yeah, and I think also, like, to build a coalition, you can't, like what I was trying to say with transgender and undocumented people, you can't be afraid to stand for what, like, your organization, your campaign, and is right, even if it's, I'm sure when Harvey Milk and Cesar Chavez marched together, right? And I'm sure initially there was and there still is a lot of discrepancy there, right? People in the labor union not wanting to be associated with LGBT people that are the 1% or close to the 1% not wanting to be associated with the working class, right?
He wasn't pointing to you, Robert. I had to get a tease in there somehow. I'm really teasing. Robert's been great.
I was pointing to the other end.
He's on our side.
He's totally on our side.
Because she was talking about 1%. But, so what that means, right, is Canvas for a Cause, specifically with us, a good example most recently is coming out and running medical cannabis campaigns a couple of years ago, starting to do that. And there was a lot of oh, is this going to be controversial with the public, right? Is this something our people, because we're totally small donor funded, we don't speak any corporate, we don't have any business money. Right now, we don't even get any grants. We're literally funded by people making small donations. And it's what if most of the people that give us money for LGBT issues don't support medical cannabis? And then we decided to work on medical cannabis anyway and stand with patients. And because we created that message for our donors and our members about how important this is, that's what they listen to. And I don't think we lost a single person when we picked up this new issue that is extremely controversial in San Diego, right? So really like standing for what actually needs to happen and what your coalition partners stand for, not being afraid to do that, is actually going to grow healthy and strong coalitions.
I'd say on the successful side, a lot of the coalition work for reproductive freedom here, I think, is a very strong coalition. There's a very strong tie between the choice community and the LGBT community, and I think a lot of the larger progressive community, and that's firm, made a lot firmer this year. And obviously marriage has been a rocky road. We're a lot farther along that road in terms of coalition. But I'd say, 5 years ago in the pre-vote on Prop 8 time, where we thought we had coalition, there's a lot of, I think, distrust in that coalition amongst progressive organizations and between the LGBT community and other organizations. And I think folks, in hindsight, realized that the work that was being done there was a little surfacey. It wasn't about understanding your coalition partners and understanding issues around faith and understanding issues around different communities and how they would come to that place. So we've learned a lot, but that was a tough lesson.
Before we bring it up for the toast, did you have one more question? I did want to point out, I teased Robert a little bit there, but that was only because I was teasing him. But nobody, I can think of nobody on the airport commission, let alone in any appointed position, who's done more for low-wage workers than Robert Gleason. So I didn't want anyone to think that I was really citing that. I mean, he has really done an amazing amount for. And I'll be very honest. In reality, for me, and I think for all of us that work in coalition and are used to working on the grassroots level, it's been a very big lesson to me to not make assumptions about where people are, where they come from, and how big of a champion they'll be for your issues. Because honestly, if it weren't for Robert Gleason, we wouldn't have had worker retention and kept our workers at the airport these past years. So I did want to point that out after I teased him. He's won many labor awards for that. So. But for everybody to know that who doesn't know his work at the airport. Mark, did you have a question?
I did, actually, and that's a nice dovetail. I mean, Senator Kehoe and Robert, to a larger extent, are now in a place to be working with, quite frankly, outside of the coalitions, the other side, or the middle ground, or what have you. And it would be useful to know what are ways that you use your positions vis-a-vis the LGBT community in settings where that's not the main thrust of your presence, and how that model can be reapplied by others in here, straight or otherwise, to advocate without necessarily being that being the sole issue.
Well, first off, it goes back a little bit to having elected officials from our community in office, because when you're in elected office, you've got to do so much more than operate, from your own political base. By necessity, you have to reach out to other people. So, basically to stay in office, but also to get things done on a policy level and on a legislative level. So, I have to deal with my Republican colleagues in the legislature, business community, lobbyists all the time, 24/7. I was going to say, but not quite 24/7, but every day of the week. I like to think that being an open lesbian in and of itself communicates and educates those folks, whether we're talking about the single sales tax or whatever. That they have some knowledge that I have interests that are in common with them, or I have policy differences with them that are different from my sexual orientation, things like that. So there's that education factor, and then there's the actual day-to-day work on policy where you develop relationships and you start to make slight inroads. We did get, we have gotten some votes on Don't Ask, Don't Tell from the Republican caucus. Nathan Fletcher came out in favor of it. We got a vote from a pretty conservative conservative Los Angeles state senator a few weeks ago on property tax after the death of a partner, either a registered domestic partner or a married spouse. So, you know, you just have to keep building and working on it all the time.
That's great. I'm getting told that I have to cut off the questions now, and I'm sorry. Okay, one more. Go ahead, because I know that.
Cool. So I might play devil's advocate a little bit with this question. But one thing that was brought up earlier was the Boy Scouts. And another thing that I often encounter when talking with non-supporters is well, what about like churches that don't want to marry gay couples? So one thing that I wanted to ask is, how do you reconcile, public equality, which obviously we all agree with in terms of like the government, with private organizations that might not necessarily believe in that, but at the same time are simply fighting for their conservative values within their own organization. So it's a little bit of a difficult question, but how do you approach that subject, since it is really difficult when it comes to things like the Boy Scouts that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. It goes back to a little bit what Deustch, what Jersey said in the beginning. You know, we have to be clear in our language. Marriage equality is about civil marriage. It does not tell any religion what to do with their religious services or celebrations. And in fact, Mark Leto, who was probably one of the most forward-thinking legislators on LGBT civil rights issues in California, had a bill that specifically said no church, synagogue, mosque would have to perform any marriage ceremony, which is, it's already a fact, but he wanted to emphasize it in the current statute, and he still couldn't get Republican votes for it. So you have to acknowledge there are places where people get to exercise even their wrong thinking, even their discriminatory and bigoted thinking, but not in the public domain. So to me, the Boy Scouts get tremendous public support. They're recognized by Congress. They should not be allowed to discriminate against a child or an adult based on what they perceive as their identity. And that's different from a clergyman saying, I'm not going to marry you in my church. Those are two, to my way of thinking, those are clear differences. I don't know if it is to you, but it's so fast.
Okay, one quick.
And I think stuff like that can boil down to like public education and what people are learning like outside of the Boy Scouts. And of course, parents can send their kids to privatized everything if they really want them to not learn about like LGBT equality.
Homeschooling.
Yeah, homeschooling, etc. But like, I mean, engaging, I just want to say this to everyone, but nobody should have to, but anybody that has the energy to talk to people that don't support issues, like Canvas for a Cause had 2 huge victories last week. The Fair Education Act didn't get the Class Act, which was an effort to remove LGBT people from the history lessons in the public schools. They failed to remove us by 46,000 signatures, and Canvas for a Cause got 7,000. I'm going to explain how these relate simply. The other win we had was on medical cannabis in Imperial Beach. We qualified, we collected a quarter of the city's signatures and ended up qualifying for a special ballot election at a city council meeting after having like 50 people speak out saying we need this now, not 2014. And during those 2 campaigns, we were able to move over 70% of people that we talked to face-to-face on medical cannabis, and over 30% of people that we talked to that do not support LGBT people in the history curriculum. By one conversation, by the end of a 5-minute conversation, they were either deciding like, okay, I shouldn't be voting against this, but I shouldn't be voting for it. It's against my morals, but I shouldn't take a stand against patients or LGBT people. Or they said like, you're right, I'll vote in favor if it comes on the ballot. So, or I won't sign the petition. So engaging those people is super crucial.
Great. Let's have a round of applause for our panel.